네, 안녕하십니까. 지금부터 국회
Good afternoon. From now on, we will have strategies for ending plastic pollution and international cooperation towards INC held jointly by the NAFCC and Delegation to European Union. My name is Jeoung-ae at the National Assembly, and I have the honor of being your host, NMC. First, we will pledge allegiance to the national flag. I would like to ask everyone to stand and face the flag in front of you. Let's pledge allegiance to the flag.
나는 자랑스러운 태극기 앞에 자유롭고 정의로운 대한민국의 무궁한 영광을 위하여 충성을 다할 것을 굳게 다짐합니다.
Please take your seats. Due to the interest of time, we will skip the national anthem. Now I'd like to introduce the distinguished guests. So many people have joined us for the seminar, but first I would like to introduce Jeoung-ae, co-chair of NAFCC, who is the host of this event. And also someone who's extended a lot of support for the joint holding of this seminar, Her Excellency Maria Castillo Fernandez, Ambassador of the EU to Korea. And also co-chair of NAFCC and the moderator for today's forum, Mr. Kim Il-jung, co-chair of NAFCC as well as professor of Dongguk University, and member of NAFCC, Kim Yong-tae, and also member of NAFCC, Park Hong-dae. And we also have people from Cezar Manole Armeno, who's from the Embassy of Romania to Korea. So many people have joined us, but due to the interest of time, I'd like to end the introduction here. Now, let's hear from co-chair of NAFCC, Ms. Jeoung-ae, for her opening remarks. Please give her a big hand. Distinguished guests, good afternoon. I am Jeoung-ae, co-chair of NAFCC. This seminar is held jointly together with the European Union Delegation, and we are joined by Her Excellency Fernandez, Ambassador of the EU. I'd like to thank her and also people from the delegation of the European Union for joining us. And of course, we have distinguished guests from the Embassy of Romania. Thank you for coming as well. Ambassador Fernandez is here with us representing the European Union, but she's from Spain. Recently in Spain, there was the worst flood ever for the first time in 50 years, and there were a lot of damages done to the country. I would like to extend my consolation taking this opportunity, and I hope that Spain would be able to restore back to its normal state as soon as possible. And we have Mr. Kim Yong-tae, member of the forum, joining us. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I suddenly forgot your name. Mr. Park Hong-dae. Yes, thank you for joining us as well. Sometimes my memories just slip my mind. And also, Mr. Kim Il-jung, co-chair of NAFCC, thank you for being the moderator. And also, I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists for joining us, and also to many people in the public for joining us. The international community is aware of the gravity of plastic pollution, and in order to come up with a global resolution, last year in March, we held a UNEA 5.2 to come up with and we came up with a resolution, and that was back in 2022, and 2 years have passed. And until the end of this year, we need to come up with an internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, and INC-5 will be held in Busan at the end of this month. So if you look at what has been progress until INC-4, we talked about potential for production reduction as well as listing of plastics and their potential ban, and ban on their exportation and distribution and so on. So many agenda were discussed, and we were able to hear a lot of opinions from different countries, and there were a lot of disagreements as well. And so therefore, this will be the last INC meeting until we actually draft a convention, and hence the international community is paying a lot of attention to it. And after the Paris Agreement, this is going to become one of the most important environmental convention of the UN, and therefore our concerted effort is a must. In this regard, this seminar is about ending plastic pollutions, and we're going to come up with strategies and resolutions and seek ways for international cooperation. And once again, it's being held jointly by NAFCC as well as the European Union Delegation, and hence this event is very significant. In April this year, 31 members of the National Assembly came together to come up with an emergency resolution for ending plastic pollution. And we ask for your continued interest for INC-5 upcoming in Busan, and the National Assembly is committed to putting our concerted effort. This is a transnational problem, and hence it is very similar to climate change. At the INC-5, we wish to come up with a successful resolution so that Korea will play a leading role in ending plastic pollution and also make contribution to climate change and green transition across the globe. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us once again. And I hope that you will be able to fully enjoy the great weather in fall. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for the kind remarks. Next, I would like to invite Ambassador Fernandez of the EU to the Republic of Korea for her opening remarks. Please give her a big hand.
Honorable members of the National Assembly, Jeoung-ae, thank you very much for your kind words towards the very difficult times for Spain at this moment. And certainly, as you said, it has a direct implication in what we have come here also to discuss. Thank you so much, Jeoung-ae, for being here, and also Park Yun-bae and Mr. Kim Il-chung and all of you. I think that this is my second time in the National Assembly since several months together with you, working very, very close together with the National Assembly Forum on Climate Change. We came here at the beginning of July to work with students, the University City Climate Academy, and now we are back again in also a very pertinent issue, plastics, and especially as Honorable Han has mentioned, it is very timely because soon Korea will have also a leading role in negotiations on plastic in Busan. It's not the only forum. I think we are all making a lot of efforts at multilateral level. We have the UN Convention on Biodiversity, COP16 in Colombia soon. We have the UN Convention on Climate Change, COP29 in Azerbaijan, and then the certification COP16 in Saudi Arabia. So a lot of fronts open, and I think we are at a very critical juncture where we need to address and take decisions. And therefore, in plastic, in Busan, decisions are needed, as you said. And you will find the European Union taking also the lead on these negotiations, trying to help Korea to find a good agreement. There is strong linkages between climate change, biodiversity, and plastic pollution. As you all know, plastic is produced by burning fossil fuels and often is disposed in incineration. And of course, all that contributes, and in particularly plastic waste, ends up in our soils, in our groundwater, in our rivers, in our oceans. How many of us, when we take a swim in our beautiful waters, we find a lot of plastics all around, but also microplastics that we also find in our bodies. So I think when we speak about plastics and plastic pollutions, we do have a lot of support from our public opinion, because I think we all feel that this is something we can contribute and we can also, be very directly affected. I've seen reports from the World Economic Forum and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which showed that there will be more plastic by mass than fishes in the ocean by 2050. That is certainly very, very telling. So let us try and tackle plastic pollution home and abroad together with our partners. That is our main goal. You all know we have the European Green Deal with very clear ambitions as a centerpiece of our climate neutrality. But we also have a series of legislation, and one of them tackles plastic pollution and marine litter, especially to accelerate our transition to a circular economy. This is part of all our efforts towards more resilient, efficient plastic economy. And we need to continue that, and I assure you that in the new Commission leadership in Europe. We have a new government in Europe with President von der Leyen again. We will stick to the action, and climate will be a key issue for us. Also with Korea, working very closely in our EU Green Partnership, and part of it, of course, is plastic, and circular economy is a big dimension of what we are doing together. In the upcoming INC-5, you will have a big delegation of the European Union coming here to support the negotiations. I was in Busan a week ago also, and I saw already the Busan city preparing itself for these negotiations to host it, and all the actions also that Mayor Park is willing to take on his also pledge for climate neutrality 2040. Let us work together. Thank you very much for choosing this discussion today. It's so pertinent. And I think that, I want to acknowledge the work that we are doing together with the National Assembly work on climate change, very, very important, one of our key partners for the Green Partnership, and I hope there will be other occasions, because the agenda of the Green Agenda is so vast, and as we see in what happened in Spain, these days disasters can come at any moment in any place of the world, and we are not ready. We are not ready for them. And the consequences are disastrous. How many lives are lost? How many destruction? So we need to take conscience and work very closely in partnership. So thank you very much for inviting us and to co-host this meeting, and hope to see you also in Busan again, because all efforts, including those of parliamentarians and all stakeholders, are so important in this fight. But also, I haven't forgotten to acknowledge Mr. Deputy Director General Cho, with whom we have been discussing a week or 2 weeks ago in our working group on the agenda of environment, energy, and biodiversity, and we are. I can say that circular economy was part of our discussions, where we would try to do work very, very closely. MOFA plays a key role in the negotiations. So thank you for coming here as well. To all of you, a very good afternoon. 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for the remarks. Then now let's invite Mr. Kim Yong-tae, member of NAFCC, for his remarks. Please welcome him with a big hand. So the United Nations Plastic Convention aims to end plastic pollution from production all the way to disposal. And we wish to create an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. And the INC-5 to be held in Busan will be a very important step for us to completing the convention. And in that regard, we are so happy to have the NAFCC and the EU delegation holding this event together. Thank you very much. In terms of plastic polymer production, Korea ranks 4th in the world. And at the same time, Korea's plastic recycling system has successfully taken root in the country. So reduction in production and raising circularity and preventing leakage into the environment and preventing microplastic and so on, all of these agendas are included in our life cycle management of plastic. Globally, around 8 million tons of plastics are entering the waters. It's called the garbage patch in the Great Pacific. We have that island. And the Boyan Slab of Netherlands, since 2013, when it was 8 years old, created a social venture called Osher Clean Up to clean marine waste and to collect plastic waste. And since 2022, Korea's Kia Motors signed a partnership with his organization. And Korea's Dongwon industry also reported that it collected 8 million tons of waste from the Pacific Ocean for the past 10 years. And the development of pyrolysis technology is very active here in Korea, and I do know that lots of conglomerates in Korea are working on that together with their international partners. And so taking this opportunity, together with Ambassador Fernandez and Ms. Jeoung-ae of the National Assembly, I like to propose you this. The pyrolysis facilities should be equipped onto middle-sized and large-sized ships and send them off to the Pacific Ocean. I'd like to make that proposal. We need to advance our purification systems so that we could produce high-quality recycled materials so as to have them be part of our creation of shipping facilities as well. And also, we would, I hope, send these ships to countries that are nearby the ocean who are suffering from these ocean waste. Once again, I wish that we will be able to confirm our respective responsibilities and also come up with effective solutions taking this opportunity. And for an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution to actually become a reality, I hope that you will make your committed efforts. And I will take interest in what will be discussed in the seminar today, and I will extend my utmost support and effort. Thank you very much for holding this event once again. I wish for all the success of INC-5 in Busan in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
감사합니다. 그럼 이상으로 인사 한 말씀.
Thank you very much. That brings an end to the opening remarks. I would like to invite the guests of honor for a group photo. May I please have the speakers and the guests of honor come here to the front for a group photo.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Now let's go into our keynote presentation. First presentation will be given by Deputy Director General Cho for Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Scientific Affairs at MOFA. By the way, if you could, I think some of you are standing, and so if you could sit towards the side, we would appreciate that, and also those sitting at the front, if you could go to the side, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm from MOFA, the Climate Change, Energy, Environment, and Scientific Affairs. My name is Jeoung-ae. And I'm going to talk about the progress of UN plastic treaty negotiations and prospects and challenges of INC-5. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present. As you can see from the title, we're going to talk about the progress of the conversation on plastic waste at the United Nations level, and also talk about the prospects and challenges of INC-5. Now, the first slide is this. And in 2022, the OECD published the World Plastic Prospect report. And according to this report, as of 2019, 4.6 billion tons of plastic are used annually, of which only 9% is recycled. And if this continues, by 2060, the amount of plastic that is produced and disposed will increase by threefold. Through a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, we wish to tackle this problem. And this is precisely why we have begun this discussion on plastic pollution at the UN level. In March 2022, the UNEA 5.2 was held, and there have been 5 INCs. And the goal is to draft a convention for a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution by year 2025. And this includes China and the United States, who are top 2 players in terms of emitting plastic waste and producing plastic polymer. We have around 170 UN member states taking part in this initiative. This means that we are gravely aware of the seriousness of plastic pollution and their socio-economic impact. And in just 2 years, by 2024, we agreed to draft a convention, and this shows us the urgency of this very issue and that all the UN member states feel that urgency. In 1992, the UNFCCC was adopted, and this instrument on plastic pollution will be the most important multilateral environmental convention since the UNFCCC. Now, to talk about how the UNC has progressed, after the March 2022 UNEA 5.2, we had INC-1 in Uruguay in November 2022, and afterwards had 3 more INCs. So these are what were discussed at each INC. Let me just elaborate. So during INC-1, the parties identified the framework of the convention, its purpose and scope, and the country's basic positions on its components. Basically, they talked about their opinion as to what should be included in the convention. During INC-2, they discussed key elements of the convention, including scope and core obligations and so on, also including the means of implementation and measures to be taken forward. And after INC-2, they created a 0 draft containing what were discussed. During INC-3 and 4, discussions were based on the 0 draft. Because this is a multilateral convention, we have gathered opinion of all parties involved, and the draft that we have made until now exceeds 70 pages, and thus we felt that we need to have another INC, especially tackling the financial issues and also design issue as well, so they decided to create an expert group for this. And we had video conference in July and August this year and had face-to-face meeting in Thailand in August to talk about the product and design of these chemical-based products. And outside of the plastic convention, In order to create a political drive, we have held numerous high-level events. For example, there was a UNGA high-level meeting, and on the occasion, Kenya and Norway, for example, held some high-level side events. And in Cala, Colombia, this week, there will be the 16th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, and also COP29 is upcoming. And we expect that there will be similar high-level side events for the facilitation of INC-5 to be held in Busan. Now, let me briefly touch upon the basic information of INC-5. INC-5 will be held from November 25th to December 1st in the city of Busan. Government delegations from more than 170 UN member states, relevant international organizations, observer organizations, industries, civil societies will take part. We're expecting more than 3,000 participants. And so this is a documentation related to INC-5. If you go to the UNEP website, you will be able to check out all of these documents in detail. We have one more INC left, and in order to successfully complete the draft for the convention, we would have to streamline what have been discussed up until now. And in terms of regulation and so on, there are stark differences in the opinions of different countries. But these are some of the important conflicting points that are within the draft at this moment. First is about primary plastic polymer, which is the raw material for plastic, and the method of regulation and the reduction targets. There's a large disagreement over that. On one side, there are people who are arguing for setting global reduction target, meaning that we can't address pollution without production regulation. Recycling alone isn't enough. But other parties oppose production reduction, and rather they're calling for a focus on recycling and waste management, and that we should reinforce related regulation going forward. And we do have other opinions in between the two, of course. And second point that is important in the draft is about chemicals of concern. There are those arguing for the chemicals of concern to be listed in the annex of the convention to ban their use, whereas others are arguing that we need to seek for individual country regulation depending on the country's circumstances and conditions. And once again, there are middle standing groups as well. For example, some are saying that we need to set standards for chemicals of concern and have each country regulate the chemicals depending on the standard. And third point is problematic plastics. Problematic plastics are plastics with short life cycle or single-use plastic. Some are arguing for the inclusion of list of single-use plastics in the annex, banning their production, sales, distribution, import and export, and so on. But there are also others who are arguing for appropriate reduction and phase-out measures by country. And once again, there are other opinions aside from these two. And there's product design and performance that I'd like to also mention. Some are arguing that we need to have design and performance standards for country-specific durability and reusability, whereas others are arguing that we need to have at least minimum design and performance standard in the annex for everyone to follow. And next is about financing or supporting the finances to countries who may lack the ability to carry out what is agreed. There are some who are arguing that developed countries should provide financial and technical assistance to developing countries and that we need to establish new funding mechanisms, whereas others are arguing that parties should be jointly obligated to raise funds and provide technical assistance and that we need to utilize existing funding mechanisms. So these are just a few key points that are under conflict. But with regards to plastic polymer production, I would say that the disagreement is the sharpest.
그렇다면 이와 같이 제5차 협상회의에서 타결해야 할 과제가 적지 않습니다만
So we need to reach agreement on a lot of items at INC-5.
신호와 노력이 이루어지고 있습니다.
But we are seeing some positive signs that the draft will be completed.
성과를 도출해야 한다는 국가들 간 공감대가
First of all, a consensus is forming among the member states,
협대표회의나 의장단회의 등 다양한 회의
and we were able to confirm that through many high-level meetings, virtual meetings that have been held since INC-4.
정주기를 다루고
And
효과적이고 이행 가능한 협약이어야 한다는 데
there is also a consensus that is increasing that the convention should deal with the entire life cycle of plastic. And also, a consensus is forming on the need to regulate problematic products such as single-use plastic and improve product design and waste management. We are definitely seeing the gap between countries becoming narrowed.
의장을 중심으로 진행되고 있습니다.
And also, the chairs of the conventions are also working on narrowing the gap by not looking at the 70-page draft, but rather looking at the key controversial areas and to see what the political wills and interventions could be possible. Now, once again, I'd like to talk about the outlook of INC-5 through my presentation. And as you can see, the challenges are high. Nevertheless, positive movements can be detected. And last but not least, if the draft is completed at INC-4, the diplomatic conference will be held to officially adopt and sign the convention. And the time and the venue for the diplomatic conference is yet to be decided. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.
발표자로
I will now introduce the second speaker. Minister Councillor Jörg Weverdorfer from the delegation of the EU to ROC will now present. Please give him a big hand.
All fine, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation and annyeonghaseyo. I talk today about the EU strategy and international cooperation on plastics. The European Green Deal, you have certainly heard about, has specific targets. One is to have climate neutrality by 2050, and the other one is to have an emission reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. In February this year, the Commission presented its assessment for emissions by 2040, which should be then by 90% reductions at least. This is still only recommended. It has still to be agreed by the other institutions. What is important, how is this put into place? We have below the European Green Deal other strategies, and we have here, for example, very important for today, the Circular Economy Action Plan, and also a European strategy for plastics in a circular economy. They go hand in hand. We have, of course, also other strategies like the biodiversity strategy, like the from farm to fork strategy for the agricultural sector, etc. The EU plastic strategy is from 2018. It has 4 pillars. First, to curb plastic waste and littering. Second, to improve the economics and quality of plastics recycling. Third, to drive investments and innovation towards circular solutions. And finally, to harness global action. Very important, a key element of it, it's the Single-Use Plastic Directive. It stems from 2019. The implementing decision is from 2021. The EU made a research on the shores of the EU and saw what they found there on the beaches. And the directive covers basically 70% of all litters found. This is the 10 most found single-use plastics item and fishing gear. So these are the objective of this directive. And you see the approach to the single-use plastic products is differentiated. It differentiates between items for which you have available sustainable alternatives. You see the examples here on the picture. I think you will find out what it is. And you have items where we don't have so far, at least, clear sustainable alternatives available. If items fall under the first category, where we have available sustainable alternatives, then there is a market ban for the EU. You cannot sell it in the EU. If there's no clear sustainable alternative available, we have two different approaches. The first is a preventive approach. We add here design requirements and particularly try to see that we have less consumption by better consumer information and consumption reduction. Then secondly, we want to have a better waste management from cleaning up the litter to separate collection to marking requirements helping in this regard and to an extended producer responsibility. Very important as well is our approach to recycled content, meaning to reuse recycled plastic in new plastic products. So the aim of the plastic strategy is to have 10 million tons of recycled plastics in new products, meaning reused in new products on the EU market by next year. This is also supported by the Circular Plastic Alliance, which is open to public and private actors and has 330-something signatories by now. As regards single-use plastic bottles, we have here clear targets. As regards the collection, by next year we want to have 77% collected, by 2029, 90%. And the reused plastic should have a content by next year of 25% and by 2030 of 30%. Similar laws exist as well for packaging, vehicles, I come to this later, and construction materials. Very important that we see that the circular economy goes hand in hand with the plastic strategy. I mean, it is better that the elements which are within the circular economy stay within the circular economy and never go out. That's always the best solution. So this is very important. We have here an action plan in the EU on the circular economy, and it aims at making sustainable products the norm in the EU and to empower consumers and public buyers to see differences in this regard in the products. It tackles as well particularly packaging and plastics. And another element is, of course, the waste reduction. It's part of the circular economy, basically not to have waste, and also to avoid waste exports and search for a better quality and safety of secondary raw materials. Also, I would like to mention the new packaging and packaging waste directive, which is so far a legislative proposal for the ones who are not so well aware of the EU institutional situation. So we have normally a proposal coming from the EU Commission. This goes into the European Council and the European Parliament, and they then discuss in a trilateral around the final agreement, which is then getting into place. And we have to distinguish between directives and regulations. So regulations go directly into force, whereas directives have to be transposed into national law. This is a directive, so you see we are still a bit far ahead, in this, or we hope that it goes quite quickly, but so far we have just a proposal. But the objectives of this proposal are very important. The first objective is to prevent and reduce packaging waste. That's normal, but very important, all packaging on the EU market should be made recyclable by 2030. This is quite a challenging objective, And there should be, of course, a decrease in the use of virgin materials. We come back here, for example, to reuse plastics. Key measures of the proposals are as well to have certain design criteria for all packaging, to have a ban on certain forms of unnecessary packaging, to have a harmonized and obligatory labeling to facilitate consumer information, to have targets for minimum recycled content in most form of secondary plastic packaging, meaning the second layer of packaging from 2030 onwards, depending in the amount on the packaging use. Then we have new targets for the reduction of packaging waste of 5%, 10, and 15 by 2030, 2035, 2040. We have mandatory reuse or refill targets in specific sectors, retail and catering, for example, and a mandatory deposit return system for SUP beverage bottles and metal cans. As I said, this is so far all a proposal. Also to mention, here's the end-of-life vehicles directive. We have one in place since 2000, for 24 years actually. So in this regard, the success is a bit limited because still around 1/3 of vehicles just disappear in the EU, causing a lot of damage for the environment. So the new proposal goes in the direction that it should then in the future, this directive cover more vehicles, also motorcycles, lorries and buses, improve the circular design of the vehicles to make producers financially responsible, extend producer responsibility. You will see this in many green regulations of the EU. And there should be assurance that at least 25% of plastic used is recycled. Also coming again to the used plastics which should be used in the production of new products. And there should be more collection and better recovery. And finally, there should be a stop of vehicles going missing. I come to an important topic. This is bio-based plastics and biodegradable plastics and compostable plastics. The objective of the EU is here to contribute to a sustainable plastics economy by improving the understanding around these materials and clarify where these plastics can bring genuine environmental benefits and under which conditions. It is very important to flag this because sometimes it seems to people, to the consumer, that this is all very positive and very green. However, if you put some plastic back in the ocean and it degrades there maybe within 4 months instead of within some hundreds of years, but within 4 months you might have a lot of microplastics then in fish and finally in our own bodies. So this is to be clarified and analyzed further, which is really environmental beneficial and what is not so much beneficial. And citizens should be guided, as well as public authorities and businesses, to have the right policies, purchasing, investing decisions in this regard. There should be also for the EU always important in the internal market with 27 member states. We try to avoid differences at national level and a fragmentation of our internal market in this respect, because this plastics will go around in any case. There is no binding law so far in place. We have a non-binding EU communication of 2022 trying to support these 3 objectives, but so far we don't have a comprehensive legislative binding framework. The EU Commission is further working on this. Equally important is microplastics. There the objective of the EU is clear. We want to reduce microplastic releases by 30% by 2030 by reducing general plastic pollutions because they degrade into microplastics, but also by restricting the use of intentionally added microplastics to products and by reducing unintentional microplastic releases. There's neither a comprehensive law in place so far. However, there are several specific laws with partial objectives. We have the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and the Fertilizing Products Regulation aiming at fertilizers, but very important is the proposal for a chemical legislation addressing intentionally added microplastics. It's a proposal from 2023, and we have a proposal for regulation on preventing pellet losses. So they're both also only proposals for this moment, but the EU is working on this, exactly knowing that this is a very important area. Finally, I want to come to a bit of horizontal topic insofar that, like with other legislation, this is cross-cutting these topics. We need citizens' involvement, and this is very important. And this we have in the EU from the very beginning, from the impact assessment before we start with the legislative process, during the whole legislative process until the law is in place, and afterwards, even with the assessment of the law, the citizens are invited to join. Then we have to get the economics right. We need always for our green transition financial enablers. We need the financing for it. This is not for free. We need innovation support. So we have Horizon Europe, and Korea will very soon have an association agreement with the EU. So I hope very soon we can have joint projects that our researchers work together on greener plastics in particular. And we have leading efforts at global level with our EU green diplomacy. In this regard, very important is that we are very well aware that this is a global crisis and we have to have a global response. We are sometimes addressed that with our green regulations we go only on our own path, but this is not the case. Sometimes we just think we must be leaders and we must be model for others, otherwise nothing is happening, but we are very well aware that we have to work and best work hand in hand with the rest of the global community. And the EU is as well very important, very much aware that we are import dependent, so both on energies but also on industrial products. If we have a global economy, so it doesn't help if our products are only green, if a lot of non-green products and energy comes into Europe. What is our approach? We have the international leadership at many multilateral fora, like the COPs, like the OECD, the WTO. We are the global leader in financing. We lead many technical support programs, and we have free trade agreements, more than 40. One is also with the Republic of Korea, and since that time, since we have the Republic of Korea, we have within this free trade agreements also a TSD chapter, Trade and Sustainable Development chapter, which covers climate, environment, energy, and we are in annual exchanges with Korea in this, and it was mentioned before, and we have also energy, environment, and climate working group with MOFA, which just took place 1 month ago. So we are in close contacts there with our partners, and we have with strategic partners also a green partnership. I come later back to this. Very important, again, I want to flag here as regards international outreach, the close connection to circular economy and what are the global targets here of the EU. We want to keep resources use within the planetary boundaries. That's one objective. The other one is that we want to decouple global economic growth from resource use, meaning it should not be dependent on an increase in resource use. And we want to promote with this jobs creation within and outside the EU, meaning that we see, as always, the green transition also as an opportunity to create new industries, create new economies, and to create new jobs. How do we do this? We talked about, and we will talk about even more about the global agreement on plastics. There's also an alliance on global circular economy and resource efficiency. We have our free trade agreements. We have outreach activities beyond that with our EU circular economy missions. And we want to initiate discussions. One discussion would be on global agreement on natural resource management, making resource management more sustainable. And the other one is on safe operating space for natural resource use. This goes to the direction to keep resource use within planetary boundaries. I come towards the historic decision to have a legal binding instrument on plastics. I just want to read out here some messages in this regard. From the EU side, the new international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution is our chance to stop the raging global crisis of plastic pollution. And the EU and its member states remain committed to the mandate given to conclude negotiations by the end of this year. We are, however, concerned about the slow progress in some regards in the negotiations so far. And while we must recognize that maybe not all details of the new treaty can be concluded, at INC-5 we find it instrumental to develop the most important provisions now. And what we consider as particularly important that the new treaty includes, these points are globally agreed criteria for the identification and listing of chemicals of concerns and problematic and avoidable plastic products. Secondly, criteria and performance requirements for product design. Thirdly, mandatory content levels of recycled plastics. And fourthly, requirements for traceable and transparency so that information is available along the value and supply chain for consumers and businesses alike. So these are our main objectives and expectations for the remainder of this year, basically for INC-5. And I want to conclude with a short mentioning of the EU-Korea Green Partnership, which hosts us here indirectly as well today. So this was concluded in the wake of the summit, EU-Korea Summit of May 2023. It aims at strengthening our efforts on combating climate change, and we aim with this to increase cooperation in many aspects, inter alia on addressing the full life cycle of plastics. And we want to support a clean and fair energy transition hand in hand with Korea. We want to work with Korea on working with third countries to facilitate their green transition. And finally, very important are further points which are mentioned within the green partnerships, and I think it's worth always mentioning them. This is that we also want to join forces as regards business cooperation, as regards sustainable finance, more important than ever. Research and innovation, I mentioned Horizon Europe and the Association of Korea, which is independent, on sustainable food systems, and finally on sustainability and resilience of our supply chains. So thank you very much, 감사합니다, for your attention.
Thank you for the presentation. Now let's go into the panel discussion straight away. This will be moderated by Mr. Kim Il-jung, co-chair of NAFCC and professor emeritus at Dongguk University.
안녕하십니까.
Hello. As introduced, I'm the moderator for the panel discussion. My name is Kim Il-jung. We just heard two presentations. We had the Deputy Director General from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who made the first presentation, and also Deputy Director General Jeoung-ae, right? Not Han Min-young. Yes, I'm sorry for the mix-up. I think I called out the wrong name, but it's Deputy Director General Jeoung-ae who made the first presentation.
조기현 팀장님, 네, 발표.
So we heard presentation from Deputy Director General Cho, and afterwards we heard from Dr. Jörg Verben-Dörfer, Minister Counselor.
And your name. 두 분
So thank you so much for the wonderful two presentations.
우리 조기현 팀장님께서는 UN
Deputy Director General Cho touched upon the progress of the Plastic Convention at the United Nations level and also talked about the prospects and challenges of INC-5. She explained what have been discussed up until INC-4, which was very informative.
이 협약이 부산 INC-5 부산 협약이 협약 회의가
And she also
성공하기 위해서 어떻게
mentioned some key points that we should pay attention to in order to lead INC-5 in Busan to success.
이게 도전과 기회가 될 수 있다.
And she also concluded by saying that this could be both a challenge and an opportunity.
요르 베벨
So, and also the second speaker, Mr. York, thank you very much for the presentation. And you talked about the strategies of the EU, and you also briefly mentioned the green diplomacy. So while I was listening to your presentation, this was my impression. So we have a long way to go, especially when it comes to going net zero. So against 1990, by 2030, 55% reduction, and then 90% by 2040. But our goal is by 2030 against 2018, I think it was negative 37%. So it was to reduce about 40%. So I think Korea has a long way to go when it comes to going net zero. And you also mentioned several policies. And, well, of course, Korea is doing well and working hard to reduce emission. And we now celebrate the 17th anniversary of this forum. And today we were joined by the ambassador. I think in the past, the British ambassador came to speak and give an opening remarks. But I think that we haven't had a global speaker presenting on a topic for a very long time. And that means that plastic knows no border. And this is a global challenge that we need to jointly address. So that was my impression. And of course, INC-5 will be held in Busan. And of course, we are here at the National Assembly to discuss about INC-5. But I think we are here to renew our commitment on fighting plastic. And I think recently, Jung-ae Daily covered an article on plastic. And we have a city or county called Ganghwa near Seoul or Incheon. And there was a coverage on plastic. And the article was talking about this fishnet for shrimp. And so about 2,360-liter bags of trash were caught. And out of that, 95% were plastic packaging. Most of them were plastic bags or vinyl. The problem here is that now they float around the river and the sea, and they they tend to move around the river and stay in midstream. And that means that the fish will have plastic bag in their stomach, and at the end of the day, we will see that or eat that on our table. So anyways, it really shows how serious the plastic problem is.
그래서 지금부터 이제
So now let's get started with the panel discussion. We have around 90 minutes, but I think I just used up a bit more than 5 minutes, so we're very pressed on time. So I think I can only give each panelist 6 minutes to state their opinions. I would appreciate it if you could be punctual. By the way, the order of panel presentation or discussion will be in the order as stated in the formal timeline, but sometimes when we have people from the government, we could have a lot of questions from the floor. So I would like to ask that the people from MOTI and the Ministry of Environment go last, because we might have a lot of questions for these government ministries. Which means that our first panelist will be Oskari Lampi, Second Secretary, Embassy of Finland. So would you please go ahead? I'm going to give you around 5 to 6 minutes. Thank you very much.
말씀해 주세요.
Thank you, honorable members of the National Assembly, dear participants. Thank you for having me here today. We heard some excellent presentations already from an international perspective. So I will be sharing some very national experiences, mostly concentrating on recycling of plastic packages, some good experiences and some challenges we have in Finland. And then if I have time, I will also speak generally on the plastic strategy in Finland. So if we go to targets, EU targets that are only 2 years away, 2025, we have targets of having 55% of municipal waste prepared for reuse or recycled, 65% of packaging waste, similarly prepared for reuse or recycling, and 50% of all plastic packaging waste must be recycled. And in the first two goals, we are very, very close already in Finland, but we are really having some challenges with the recycling of plastic packaging. So I will give 2 examples, one good and one negative, and also they serve as examples of the extended producer responsibility at work in Finland. So we have a very, very high recycling rate on plastic beverage packaging, that is plastic bottles. And this is due to the deposit system that we have had at place for quite some time, some decades already, and also for plastic bottles for 15 years. And it's also shared, for example, in other Nordic countries and I believe Baltic countries too. So when we buy plastic bottles of beverages, the price includes a deposit, and that is now then returned to the consumer when he or she returns the bottle back to a recycling point. And this system is funded, paid by the importers and beverage manufacturers. So this way they can avoid paying additional beverage packaging tax. It's a voluntary system, but pretty much all of the manufacturers and importers are part of the system, as it's economical and more convenient for them. And with this system in beverage packages, including also aluminum and glass, we have around 97% recycling rate. So that was a good example. But then we are struggling with other recycling, especially the collection of other plastic packages. Finland is a country of long distances. It's often and pretty sparsely populated. So often the plastic packages also end up in mixed waste. And they are then incinerated for energy and electricity, heat, mostly district heating and electricity. So they don't end up in landfills, but still we are not getting closer to the circularity of the plastic value chain. So how we try to tackle this are with some new regulation. For example, since 2 years ago, like housing properties of five or plus families, they have had to organize their own plastic collection, separate collection. And then we are trying to add all the time also the public recycling points. And this is also done through an organization that is funded by the packaging manufacturers and the importers. So again, this is a part how we kind of realize the producer responsibility. Then, on a more general level, a couple of words. As I already showed, in Finland we tend to bring the industry very strongly together, and that is also how we have created our plastic strategy called Plastics Roadmap. First one was in 2018 as the EU strategy, but it was updated two years ago in 2022. So the government is the coordinating point of contact, but it's mostly the industries and other stakeholders, civil society, who take part in creating and drafting this strategy. And a lot of the actions taken there are also voluntarily. For example, since last year, for agricultural waste, we have had a voluntary similar organization as the two ones previously mentioned, who are organizing and developing a system for recycling agricultural plastic waste. And the similar thing between the restaurant and hotel industry and the government. There's an agreement, voluntary agreement, of promoting the use of tap water, Finnish excellent tap water, instead of plastic bottles. So this is how we try to move on in generally also in green transition and climate targets in Finland. So bringing the industry together because they are the ones making the implementation of the changes. The strategy, the roadmap is a very much full life cycle roadmap. Starts from raw materials, product design to production, consumption, and then the reuse or recycling and reuse. And this is something we want to emphasize also in the international contexts. One point of that for international cooperation, we hope we can advance also with Korea, for example, is the kind of reuse and rethinking side of our approach to plastic. So there is a lot of activities going on, developing new innovations, new materials, whether it's recycled plastic, bio-based plastics, composites, anything. So that's also something we hope we can work more with other countries. I think I already extended my time frame, so thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. You shared examples from Finland as to what your nation is doing to tackle the plastic waste problem. We appreciate it very much. And you also touched upon the topic of EPR and the voluntary participation of the public to come up with strategies, and I think that's going to be very important for us as well.
번째로
Next, we have Mr. Chan Wang from the industry. He's the executive VC of Korea Petrochemical Industry Association. You have the floor. Yes. Good afternoon. I would like to thank Chairperson Han for organizing this seminar. It's a great opportunity to learn. And I would like to give you the perspective of the industry. And as Mr. Kim mentioned, when it comes to Korea, we are number 4 in terms of petrochemical industry. And if you look at the automotive industry and also the petrochemical industry, we provide materials. Now, INC-5 will be held in Busan. So Busan is the host country or city, but I believe that we have to do a lot of work, but at the same time, I'm slightly concerned about some of the side effects. Now, of course, we need to end plastic production, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the society enjoys the benefits of that. And I wish to see such a solution at INC-5. Now, when it comes to textile or electronics and auto, this is the industry's point of view. Now, we do not have an alternative material to plastic, and that causes concern. Of course, we try to recycle single-use plastic, and I fully agree that. But if you look at textile, electronics, and auto parts, especially when we need to produce lightweight materials and high functional materials, then we do not have a clear option B. And in that context, when cutting plastic, then we will need to rely on import, which will undermine our cost competitiveness. So that is the first challenge. And number 2, we need to create a positive loop. So now at our association, as of yesterday, we actually changed the name. And in fact, our new name is KCIA, and we want to go beyond the high added value products and move into a new horizon, which is why we changed the name from KPIA to KCIA. And in fact, we are doing our best to produce eco-friendly materials, especially biodegradable plastic and pyrolysis equipment is something that we are heavily investing in. However, now when it comes to eco-friendly plastic policies, we need to improve those. And when it comes to collection system and incentives provided to recycling should be enhanced so that we can create a virtuous cycle, and the industry can also benefit from that trend. So together with the government's policy, we also need to raise awareness of the public. And at the same time, we, as I mentioned, need to create a virtuous cycle or loop. So I do not know the conclusion of INC-5, but at the end of the day, we need to promote circular plastic economy, and that should be our direction forward. And of course, we need regulation, but we need some positive signals so that the industry can keep investing in that trend. So that was the demand of the industry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. For offering us the angle of the industry. You also talked about some of the difficulties of the industry. And in fact, you also briefly mentioned your expectations of INC-5. You wished the forum every success. You agree with the direction that we are taking, but then given that we have no alternative option to plastic, well, if the regulations are too heavy, then it will stifle the industry. Of course, we do need regulation, but then you briefly mentioned about that. And you also made some recommendations. Thank you very much.
그러면은 그 다음에는 벨리.
Next, we'd like to hear from Veolia Korea. Mr. Heeyong, the Managing Director of Wake Business Line, will make his remarks. Nice to meet you. So we are headquartered in Paris, France, and our company's name is Veolia. And I'm working in its Korean office. I'm the Managing Director of Waste Business Line. So we specialize in environmental management, and we have businesses around 58 countries with 22,000 employees working for environmental issues. And we came to Korea in 1999. So we have seen an accumulated investment of around 1 trillion won for the past 25 years. And we are continuing to expand our business. So I think I can talk about the environmental issue from the business side because I'm in the business side. So I think I can talk about some practical stuff. And I want to also touch upon INC-5, the potential success that it could reap, and also the harmonization, that coordination that needs to be done among various stakeholders for INC-5. Other speakers have talked about important comprehensive frameworks that we could benchmark going forward. And there's especially the European Green Deal and also the Circular Economy Action Plan that was mentioned in the presentation. And if I were to touch upon some really key points, by 2025, recycling the packaging by 50%, and by 2030, realizing 100% reusable plastic packaging, and also by 2029, there would be the mandatory deposit system. These are some of the things that I would like to mention by briefly summarizing what have been talked about. We talked about the ban of SUP or single-use plastics, and also the EPR or Extended Producer Responsibility System. And we talked about standardized collection and sorting system at the EU level. And among them, starting from July 2023, we saw the recycled content ratio declared by the EU at the automotive sector, and hence Korea is making necessary preparations for that. And that's going to be a great challenge for us going forward. We, at the business side, really feel that. And the Republic of Korea is trying to go together with the international community by coming up with K-Circular Economy Roadmap and other initiatives as well, and also the Korean New Deal. These are some of the initiatives that Korea has pursued in line with the international community. However, in terms of reducing actual reduction of plastic pollution, there is still a big gap. There are lots of items under dispute that was mentioned in the previous presentation, and my idea is in alignment of that. But for example, there's a lot of disagreement about the recycled content, the target for recycled content. It's going to be very much connected to the existing facilities and various interests of the stakeholders. So yeah, so that's why the dispute isn't continuing. And also, here in Korea, I believe that EPR has taken root to some extent and it's improving. However, I believe that EPR needs to be applied not just to the packaging sector, but extend to other sectors as well going forward. And if you look at Korea's policy, the collection and sorting system are largely centered on the local governments or the municipalities. But I think we need to standardize them and unify them in order to enhance the work that we're doing today. So that's a suggestion that I'd like to make today. And last suggestion that I'd like to make, we actually have 3. I might have mentioned some of them already, but first is that these are some of the areas that we need cooperation between EU and the ROK. First is knowledge transfer. Once again, my company is headquartered in Paris, France. And hence, we're able to gain access to technologies that are unavailable in Korea, and we're trying to apply that to Korea. But I believe that we're in the private sector, but the government sector also needs to work hard to make sure that foreign technologies are transferred into Korea. Of course, Korea is a technologically advanced country as well. So if we can have a technical exchange between us and other countries with other advanced technologies, we can definitely provide a synergy effect. Second issue is market integration. So what I mean by that is when we talk about plastic recycling, what's really important is its traceability. Traceability is really important when it comes to recycling and reuse. And the origin of the plastics also need to be identified correctly as well. And we need to provide a system for that and also create a standard for that as well. So maybe we could work on a joint certification system between the EU and the Republic of Korea that would help both parties. So I would say it would help us and help them, vice versa. And last point I would like to raise is, once again, I come from a private company, and I want the government to be involved in the partnership investment. When we think about partnership and investment in green growth, I believe that the public and the private can go together because plastic is a challenge, a global challenge, and hence it makes sense that the public and private sector should work together for investment into these areas. And also, a lot of joint ventures, for example, are being done at a private sector to enhance related infrastructure. That's going to be very important going forward. So once again, those were the 3 points that I wanted to mention or what I wanted to suggest. And we are an FDI company in the area of environment. And we're very much interested in the synergy effect that could be produced between the EU and the Republic of Korea. We believe that the synergy is going to be great. Once again, Korea is technologically advanced, and therefore, I'm sure we will be able to make a lot of contribution for the EU as well, and vice versa. So once again, if we cooperate, we could be more effective in tackling this big challenge of plastic waste. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for the remarks. We appreciate the opinion from person who is actually on the business side. And thank you for your suggestions on potential cooperation between EU and Korea. And you raised 3 suggestions to that end. I'm sure the representatives from the government entities heard your remarks. Please remember them and try to have that reflected in the policies that you will make going forward. And you can definitely take his remark into consideration when you're preparing for INC-5 in Busan.
다음에는
Next. Now, I would like to invite the Chief Researcher Fellow, Lee So-ra.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentations and opinions by the panelists. So, you know that we have 77-page text with regards to INC-5 that was released this week. And so things are very hectic for us these days. And I hope that we will be able to hear some really valuable insights at the forum today. And now allow me to share my opinion. So at KEI, we created a report on addressing plastic pollution issue, and it was uploaded this month. And our research showed that life cycle management and creating a convention did not necessarily go hand in hand 100%. However, when we think about the convention and the impact that it's going to have on Korea, we believe that our management should be more conservative and also strict. So in the report, we talked about Korea's 5 main policy areas. First is the reduction of plastic production. Industry-wise or internationally, as a matter of fact, there's still a long way to go in terms of reducing plastic production. So during the intersessional work on August, according to a report that was raised by the financial group, in 2040, to end plastic pollution, we need around $1.8 trillion, which means that our financial support needs to increase by threefold. And other reports show that the more we recycle, greenhouse gases actually increased and cost increase. So we have now 190 member states who are involved in this convention, and they all argue that, or they have all agreed that we need to do more recycling. But ironically speaking, if cost rises and greenhouse gases arises with more recycling, how can we offset that? That is the reduction of virgin plastic, I would say. And so Korea and other nations need to make international response with regards to this problem that I just talked about. Now, second is elimination and phasing out. It's basically about substitutes and alternatives. And when we talk about problematic plastic and avoidable plastic, we talk about those two terms, and we also talk about unnecessary plastic, like excessive packaging, for example. When we are delivering food, we don't really need plastic fork. These are deemed unnecessary plastic. And avoidable plastic is straw, something that can be substituted with other things. And also plastic bags, they can be substituted with fabric bag when you go out to do your groceries. So by clarifying what the definitions of these terms are, we can more effectively make effective responses. And as for the problematic plastics, according to a report by Norway Institute, in plastic there are 16,000 chemicals, and among these chemicals, only 6% is managed appropriately. So we keep talking about microplastic and its seriousness, but thinking about plastic alone isn't enough. We need to look at the chemicals that actually go inside it, and when they are released into the human body or to the environment through food and so on, what impact is it going to have? These are some of the things that we need to take into consideration. And third is circularity. So we saw in the case of Finland, for example, the deposit return system, or EPR, was mentioned as well. Here in Korea, the deposit return system is applied to single-use cups and some glass items as well. But from my point of view, the deposit refund system is limited at the moment. It's about returning the cup and, having them disposed in the right way. But I think we need to overhaul the existing system to go into an extended producer responsibility. And this is going to be more impactful than the deposit return system or DRS. So Korea's Producer Responsibility Recycling Program has been introduced for the past 30 years and it is receiving a lot of positive feedback. But one journalist asked me this question: you have applied EPR for the past 20 years, but how come we still cannot effectively address waste problem? And I answered that Korea's EPR focuses on recycling and not reduction. That's the problem. However, the EPR that is discussed at the OECD level actually considers from production all the way to the end, and it actually takes into consideration the reduction of waste. And that's going to be very critical, and hence Korea would have to rethink the terminology or the scope of the EPR that it's implementing right now. And fourth point I'd like to raise is preventing environmental release. So, actually, I did some research on battery, and we do a lot of supply chain management with regards to battery, but why not plastic? So plastic is an important resource, and making them circular is going to be very critical for us going forward. And here in Korea, I think we need to manage plastic as a major resource to use. Elimination, a complete elimination doesn't make sense, but we need to be able to make sure that they can be managed in a circular manner. And also, I was very impressed with the EU target that were shared in the presentation with regards to microplastic. Here in Korea, we do not have a data to track microplastic yet. And so once the convention is adopted, maybe Korea can make necessary preparations for better managing microplastic. These are some areas of improvement I'd like to mention, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you. You talked about a conservative approach, and I agree. It's very important that we be conservative when it comes to this issue. And a life cycle from the perspective of life cycle management, you talked about 5 points, which were very insightful. So I read the paper that you submitted in advance, and they were very informative. But thank you for being very brief due to the interest of time.
Next, Carbios, am I pronouncing this right? We would like to hear from Senior Advisor Fabrice Espinosa of Carbios. You have the floor. Was I okay with my pronunciation?
Slides for maybe to support my speech. Honorable member of the National Assembly, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hosting me here. My family and I, we enjoy so much the beaches of Jeju and Namhae, but when you travel outside of Korea in the region, then you really realize the urgency to end plastic pollution, and I think that's why we're here all today. I don't want to go back on the figures because I think everybody mentioned the figures that are here. One thing I want to discuss, and Carbios is a French company looking at the end of plastic, at the end of life of plastic, is that there is no one single solution today to recycle all different plastics, because we have many different kind of plastics, all right? So we at Carbios, we decided to focus on PET plastics. Why PET plastic? Because PET plastic represents 100 million tons of plastic production every year among the 460 million tons, so roughly 25% of plastic production. Secondly, we focused also on PET plastics because today, only a very tiny part of the PET produced is currently recycling or looking at recycled, is transparent plastic bottles, which represent less than 20% of the PET production, meaning that 80% of PET is not recycled today at all. So we're talking about more than 80 million tons, right? So that's why we look at it. How can we recycle the whole PET things? In order to be successful, I would like to talk today about two pillars that we have implemented at Carbios. The first one being innovation. So in terms of innovation, we have innovated with new recycle technology. We were mentioning about there is no plan B. In fact, without bio-recycling technology, we found a plan B for all PET waste. And I think that's key because we're not talking about only 20% or 50%. We're talking about 100 million tons of plastic that we can recycle thanks to our technology. And we not only can recycle this with our enzymes, unique technology, but we can also achieve circularity because we managed to go back to the virgin quality of the PET thanks to our technology. And that's where also we're innovative because we go beyond the recycling technology, we go to the circularity model. So basically, we bridge in between the PET waste, which are not waste anymore, they can become feedstock, and we transfer them into the polymer, which is the PET producers, plastic producers. And we managed to bridge that gap with our technologies. We also bring new business model as we unite the ecosystem of partners for long-term international cooperations, all right? We have strategic shareholders that are coming from the industry. We have thought leaders like Ellen MacArthur Foundations. We have institutional financiers, biotech partners, industrial partners, and we hope that we will have soon some Korean partners there as well. Industrial partners that are working for 10, 20, 30 years partnership with us. We're not like looking at one-shot partnership. We are looking at long-term partnership because we are successful if we have long-term approach there. And also brand partners because we need to work with packaging partners, with textile partners to make sure that we cover the issue of cost, the issue of feedstock, and the different other issues. So that's key for us to have those international partnerships with all the ecosystem of the plastic production. And by doing this, okay, then we managed to achieve some very significant results in terms of decoupling production, meaning reducing the use of fossil fuel to produce plastic, thanks to our circularity, because we are circular, so we can reuse 100% of waste from PET to produce brand new PET. We also have highest quality in terms of recycling, so we are not downscaling the capacity quality. We have same level of quality than virgin plastic. We have 5 more times circular than the conventional technologies that are used today. And last but not least, we are also managing to reduce by 90% the CO2 emissions thanks to our products. So I think that's really key achievements there, thanks to that technology. The second pillar I wanted to mention as well is partnership with governments. I mentioned we are a European company, so we have to benefit from a lot of European programs, and I think that's something that would be interesting to bring at a global scale. First of all, we are a SME, so in terms of financing R&D, financing demonstration plants, and even financing industrial plants, we needed some financing support. And when you talk about recycling, when you talk about circularity of plastic, there is no short-term solution, okay? So we're looking at long-term plans. And investors sometimes, without strong policies, there is risky there. So the support of governments in terms of financing early stages is very important. Then what we need, and Jörg, you have as an extensive presentation on the regulation, so I won't insist there, but I think the role of plastic policy support for plastic recycling from the European market is key, because it gives the certainty to the investors, because it gives also the obligations to the brand owners to have this textile or packaging recycling fibers, because it push the public to understand that, okay, maybe it has a higher cost, but this is for a specific reason. And so beyond plastic recycling also as well, what is interesting and very interesting from the European Union, in our opinion, is also the policy support in terms of circular economy. So you look at the first step is recycling, and the next step is circular economy. And again, on circular economy, that's a target from 2035, because we need some time to implement it. But our technology is completely aligned with that strategy. And last but not least, of course, if we want to recycle, not only we need policies, not only we need financing, but we need feedstock. Because without feedstock, we call it feedstock, I'm sorry if some others call it waste, but we need plastic waste. So we need plastic, we need to collect, we need to sort, and we need then to put it back into the industry with technologies that are allowing us to recycle. Here, today, in Europe or in many countries, like also in Korea, I've been living 3 years in Korea, so I know very well the different bags and the different way of sorting. We are very successful on transparent plastic bowls. Okay, it's well known in terms of PET. People are doing it. With Carbos technology, we are able to recycle 100% of polyester textile. Today, this feedstock or this waste is not considered. So this is something we will need to implement. So we have started engaging with EU, but of course we would love to have discussions at the global scales to see how we can sort and collect textile waste so that we can put it back into, at a circular level, into the industry. I think for us, it's in order to conclude, and I hope I wasn't too long, basically we definitely support the regulations at an international scales, because that will be supportive of the industry, that will be supportive of the collections, that will be supportive of the production of new recycling capabilities, and that will be supportive of using the 4 Rs, reduce, recycle, reform, and everything. So we believe that we need a global scales treaty to support all of companies from Korea, from the European Union, and the global partnerships, so that we can have this global approach and reducing plastic. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Yes, you talked about what Carbios is doing, and you also told us your approach and the approach that we need to take at the global level. So you talked about innovation. I think it was one of your keywords, and also partnership, and also support. I think those were the keywords. And of course, it's natural from a private sector's point of view. And you also briefly mentioned your expectations about treaty, but at the same time about the regulations as well. Thank you.
다음은
Next, we'd like to hear from Professor Jeong-ae of Chungnam National University. Hello, it's very nice to meet you. My name is Jeong-ae from Chungnam University, and thank you so much for inviting me to this forum. So I have a very short time allocated to me, so I'm going to try to talk about the Plastic Convention and some key points from the perspective of Korea. I do have a PowerPoint ready. Could you put it up? Oh, the deck is not ready. I see. So maybe you can take a look in your booklet. It's probably printed in there. It's page 45. As for the International Convention on Plastic, it just heralds the fact that the circular economy has arrived. Many countries around the world would have to accelerate their efforts to establish a circular economy going forward. And it's not just about ending plastic waste, but for carbon neutrality, global cooperation is necessary. So once again, global plastic pollution problem and carbon neutrality both need global cooperation. The emission of greenhouse gases is around 2 billion tons from plastic. And we have around 60 billion greenhouse gases emission around the globe, which means that plastic take up around 3%. And by 2060, If plastic production continues to rise like it is today, we're going to see that figure increase by threefold, meaning that 6 billion carbon dioxide will be emitted as a result, and hence it'll be very difficult for us to realize carbon neutrality. So, in other words, for carbon neutrality, we do need to reduce plastic production to some extent. Today, I would like to raise 4 points with regards to Korea's role in the Plastic Convention. First, we need to reinforce a life cycle management from production to disposal and also design good circular product. And second, Korea has implemented its K-plastic circular economy, and though it might have some aspects that is lacking, I think we need to share the accomplishments that we have made under this initiative. And third is EPR system has taken firm root in Korea, and it's important that we share the case, especially with Asian countries, to contribute to ending pollution. And last point is with regards to INC-5. For its success, Korea needs to play the role of bridging other stakeholders in the global arena. If you look into the next page, the next slide outlines the value chain of plastic industry. Especially pertaining to Korea's plastic industry. The petrochemical industry here in Korea is largely centered on large conglomerates, and we see around 15 million tons being produced every year. And we compound the plastic and we convert them, so we have the manufacturing companies to this end. And these manufacturing companies, according to Statistics Korea, we have around 6,400 companies of the kind, and the number of employees is around 200,000, although the figure could change. So what's really important in plastic product manufacturing is that they're basically based on petrochemical products, and they use that to make the plastic products, and circularity is really important here. But these plastic product manufacturers, many of them are small. And then we have those who are distributing and selling these products. And last but not least, at the end of the value chain, we have companies that collect, sort, and recycle these products. We have around 13,500 of them. And 72% of these entities have 10 employees or less. So these are very small companies that are taking care of collecting, sorting, and recycling. And plastic takes about 11% of the entire recycled volume, around 440,000 tons. So it's important that we understand the attributes of the Korea's plastic industry value chain. And overall, I can say that when it comes to petrochemical or plastic manufacturing and so on, we do have advanced technologies, and we do have solid foundation for collection, sorting, and recycling. But our weakness is that we don't have an eco-friendly design for production, taking circularity into account. So going forward, we would have to enhance our strength and at the same time complement our weaknesses. The next slide shows the K-plastic circular economy that we have established from a life cycle management point of view, from production to manufacturing, distribution, consumption, collection, and sorting and recycling. And many of them, once again, take the entire life cycle into account. But you see that some of them are written in black and some of them are written in green. The greens are the ones that need to be complemented further going forward. And if you look at it, the recycling part, which is in green, the green circle, almost all the initiatives are in black. But if you look at the circle in red, which is about the production of circular raw material, most of what is outlined there is in green, which means that we are lacking in this area. And therefore, reinforcing this area is very critical in promoting circularity here in Korea. So once again, recycling is doing well in Korea, but not so much in other areas. So EPR has pollution prevention and collection, which is very effective. And we can definitely expect a lot of effect from that. And we can reduce cost in processing plastic and also in producing recycled materials and so on. And if you look at the next slide, Korea has applied EPR especially to the packaging sector. And around 1 million tons of these packages are being delivered out to the market, and around 90% of them are recycled. And this figure actually includes energy recovery. So that's why it explains that high level of 90%. But when it comes to environmental release or environmental pollution, when it comes to packaging, at least, Korea is doing very well. So in September, according to an article in Nature, most of the plastic pollution comes from African and Asian countries. If you look at the slide, annually, 15 million ton comes from Asia and 14 million ton come from African regions. So there's a lot of mismanagement. There's open burning and debris and environmental release and open dumping happening in these regions. And I would say that since Korea's EPR is very effective in preventing release and open burning, if we can share our system with these countries, especially in the Asian region, it would make significant contributions. Now, if you look at page 49, already in Korea, we have done cooperation with Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysians. Our Ministry of Environment and also other environmental corporations have shared their experiences with other Asian countries. Now, if you look at the bottom of page 49, it talks about the life cycle management of plastic. It starts from plastic polymer and chemicals to design, disposal, emission and release to the environment, and also education. So while we call this convention a convention to end plastic pollution, I believe that we need to further enhance the circularity and reinforce regulations with regards to unnecessary polymers and so on. But of course, the target date and the method of regulation is still under controversy. However, at least I believe the life cycle management aspect needs to be included in the convention. As mentioned by MOFA already, well, you see in page 50 that there are lots of topics under conflict at the moment with regards to, are we going to have a common goal or a voluntary goal by nations? Are we going to do production reduction? Is that going to be included or eliminated from the convention? There are stark disagreements among the parties. But here in Korea, if you look at the bottom of page 50, because countries have different opinions and have different conditions. Some countries are producing countries, some countries are consuming countries. So I would say that differential responsibility is going to be important going forward. But of course, common responsibility is important. But you see that I have actually outlined some common responsibilities here in green circle, one of which includes the limitation and ban on the use of single-use plastics and also implementation of EPR. Those are some of the common responsibility that I like to raise that should be included in the convention. On the left, we see a different responsibility and priority focusing on advanced countries. They would have to reduce plastic consumption and design eco-friendly circularity products, financially support the developing countries, and so on. And as for developing countries or highly polluted countries, they are in the blue circle. They need to focus on purifying plastic pollution and reinforcing their capability to process or dispose waste and also prevent the release of plastic into the environment. So if everybody can play their due responsibility, it would be great, and it is very important for Korea to play the role of bridging the different opinions of the stakeholders in this regard. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the wonderful opinions. You talked about the significance of the convention and also touched upon the role that Korea ought to play. And you also mentioned that we need to share the accomplishments that we have made with regards to EPR. That our exemplary cases should be spread to other nations. Now, from what I heard, you actually was a speaker for a MOE event in Jeju Island, so thank you for that as well.
Next, I would like to invite the Director Hong Soo-yeol of Resource Circulation Society and Economy Institute for his remarks. Thank you very much. So I would like to go over some of the sticky points of the treaty and also to solve this problem, what do we need to do? So I would like to touch upon those two topics. So now when it comes to the plastic treaty, for that to carry significance in whatever form it takes, the treaty needs to talk about reduction. So, treaty without any statements or clauses of minimum reduction would be useless. So we need to at least have statements about reduction and at least show determination, or at the very least, or we have to provide some statistical numbers. And of course, it would be great to have some sort of numbers in the treaty, but then even if we cannot go that far, we have to at least show commitment. And Korea also should at least show determination that going forward, it will cut production of plastic, because for now, I believe that the position of the Korean government is too ambiguous. Now, of course, I think that because of national interest, countries may not specifically stipulate how much they want to cut, but at least if we look at from the larger picture, we need to show determination. Now, when it comes to plastic cut, you have the oil producers and also the plastic industry, and they do not like what they're seeing right now. then how do we need to deal with that? I do understand the concerns of the industry. And of course, we cannot take a cookie cutter approach because that can cause side effects. I fully understand that. However, when it comes to the treaty, at least the expressions that we use, we need to serve the consumers and the citizens. And we cannot actually create panic for the public. So when it comes to reduction, we have to stay cool-headed because we can reduce. And now reduction in the treaty would be reduction of the primary polymer, and that is produced by petroleum, and actually a renewable energy source can be used to replace that. So it does not mean to reduce the plastic itself or the use of the plastic itself. And there are many ways to reduce plastic. First and foremost, ban single-use plastic, or we can also make a transition to multi-use, or we can extend the life cycle or life of plastic products, which is too short for now. Or we can also extend EPR. And those are some of the ways to address the challenge. So up to what point can we do is something to discuss. We cannot just say that we cannot reduce. And we cannot create fear by saying that reduction will mean the end of the industry. So I think that we need to take a wiser approach. And now, if you look at the petrochemical industry and the chemical industry or plastic industry, Korea, yes, is a leading country. But then the treaty does not mean taking action right now. It's about painting the picture for the next 10 to 20 years. So now, if you look at the plastic industry and the petrochemical industry in Korea, do you think that their industry will remain the same in 10 years? Now, countries like China is chasing us rapidly, and given that landscape, I do not think that Korea will maintain its solid #1 leadership for a very long time. So we cannot be complacent. So when approaching this problem of reduction, the petrochemical industry and the plastic industry need to look at the great transition and to decide on their stance within that transition. And I believe that, well, of course, having a treaty is welcoming, but then I would like to make some comments because I do have some concerns. Now, of course, when it comes to the pollution caused by plastic, I think that we also need to raise public awareness. So it's not up to the government and the industry only to deal with that issue. I think that we have to open this agenda to the public and to raise their awareness so that we reach consensus. And that is the only way for an international treaty to lift the awareness of the public. For now, we're not doing that. So we have to communicate with the public, but that's not something that I'm seeing right now, which is a shame. So to solve the plastic problem, what do we need to do? First and foremost, well, if you look at the statistics of today, well, we cannot control plastic reduction because we only know the production of plastic as a whole. We need to break it down by material. we do not have the detailed data on the plastic production by material, and we need to set the target by material, but so far that is far-fetched, which means that the industries cannot design their own plans because we do not have the right statistics. Now, this will determine the success or failure of this agenda, and it's something that requires the efforts of both the industry and the government, and also about reduction and reuse. The Korean government does not have a specific plan on these two, and that means that we need to set a target and we need a specific roadmap to deliver those two targets. And that means that we need to make improvement in terms of the system or the institutional schemes. For now, we are taking an approach which is by far too simple. So we need to specialize the policies. For instance, we need to define single-use plastic. So you have packaging and plastic. We have to work with the definition so that we know what policy to use to deliver what purpose. And within that, what are we going to do with the deposit return system is something that we need to do going forward. So now you have the deposit return system for single-use plastic, but then that needs to be translated into the PET system as well, so that when it comes to packaging or single-use plastic, we have a quality system that manages both. However, Korea is not taking action. And because of that, we are losing out on the opportunity or missing out on the opportunity to move into a circular economy, which is a shame. Now, when it comes to recycling, what do we need to do with that? Of course, we have to increase the share or the ratio of recycling. And well, next year we will celebrate the recycling system, which marks 30 years in Korea. But now, at the end of the day, what we need to do is, since we now pursue a volume-based waste fee system for the recycling, we have to revisit the current system and decide whether this current system can determine the success of the next 30 years in Korea. So we have to revisit the system to validate the system and make improvement where necessary. That means that when it comes to the volume-based waste fee system and the APR system and also the recycling system, we need those three pillars to revise or to upgrade the system of today and move to the direction that we want to go. And lastly, I would like to briefly mention about microplastic. And sometimes unintentionally, we release microplastic to the environment, and we need to deal with that. Especially now, we have a lot of microplastic flowing into the land. And especially now what we have here, we have organic materials that actually flow to the land, and that would include, for instance, biosolids and the food waste and so on and so forth, which is why we need to manage that, to manage microplastic as a whole. So when you think of wastewater, now of course wastewater can also flow into the agricultural water. And of course, recycling plastic also has to go through, for instance, factoring and sorting and so on and so forth. And then the effluent will go into the river stream and the water system. So it's not just the industry, but then overall, we have a serious problem about microplastic, but Korea is not conducting a nationwide survey on that. So we need to deal with that as well and tackle that problem. That would be all for me. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for that comment. I think you stressed on the need to redefine reduction, and also you said that reduction should be a key idea in the instrument, and you also said that the industry needs to have a long-term perspective when coming up with a blueprint. And you also said that in working on this treaty, the citizens were not involved. And then you also talked about reduction, reuse, recycling, and EPR, and also the volume-based waste-free system is not enough. So you mentioned the need to overhaul the system that we have right now. And you also briefly mentioned about microplastic. So thank you very much for the comprehensive talk. Now I would like to invite Chairperson Kim Ha-neul from NAFCC Committee on Young Generation. Yes, hello everyone. I am the chairperson of NAFCC Committee on Young Generation. It's a pleasure to be here. And today I will give you the perspective of the youth, and also in the context of the treaty, I would like to give you my opinion of what way we should go towards in terms of going plastic free. Now, when we drink, we have to encourage the young people to reduce plastic. So in the interest of time, I would like to briefly mention this. Now, a survey of citizens' plastic emissions found that bottled water and beverages generated the most single-use plastic waste. And actually, about 27%, they actually buy bottled water. And also, when they buy bottled water, the younger they were more likely to buy bottled water, and they preferred bottled water more than other age groups. So as you can see here on my first page of this proceedings, now you see that the young generation prefer bottled drink or bottled water because they can trust the bottled water. They think it's more convenient, and they think that it tastes better. And what I would like to bring your attention to is that 32.4% also said that bottled water consumption helped the environment. And of course, water is an essential part of our lives. So buying bottled water all the time would be counterproductive to plastic-free policies. And of course, I think that one person from the EU talked about drinking tap water. I think that we need to raise public awareness. We need to radically reduce bottled water consumption, including reducing negative perceptions of tap water and educating people about plastic pollution. And number two, I think that we need to have a plastic information website. Now, if you look at different websites here in Korea, that can be of great help to raising awareness. Because I majored in an environment, I believe that environment should be at the forefront of the communication. And of course, you need to be informed. And actually, TV, radio, and the internet are the most preferred ways for the public to obtain environmental information. And actually, they preferred those media over other channels. So I think that environmental education for the public should be done through mass media and the internet, because that will be more effective. Especially the youth in Korea play a pivotal role in sharing and producing information through social media. media as part of their self-branding and outreach. However, in Korea, plastic-related information and statistics are not consolidated and are not easily available on the internet, which undermines the reliability of the data, which is why I think that we need a platform to provide the accurate information to the public. And because of that, I believe that once we have an instrument in place, we need to open a plastic-related information website to make information available for the people. Next, I would like to briefly talk about how Korea should move to plastic-free country. First, I think that we need to enforce strong government-led single-use disposable policies. And because other speakers also mentioned this, I would like to briefly talk about what we need to do in the initial phases of plastic production. We need to work on that. And since I am one of the young people, I would like to briefly mention the existence of Global Youth Coalition on Plastic Pollution, and it calls for a treaty to end plastic pollution by 2035. However, as you know, in Korea, in November of last year, the government announced that it will shift its single-use plastic management policy from imposing fines to supportive policies based on voluntary participation. And according to a survey conducted by the Ministry of Environment, Korean citizens believe that the problem of plastic waste is serious and that the government is most responsible. And they also think that the top solution should be to regulate the use of plastic, which is why, taking all this together, voluntary participation-based single-use waste reduction policies are unlikely to be responsive to the international and domestic needs and unlikely to gain public acceptance. So we need to implement strong government-led policies to regulate single-use products and rapidly reduce waste at the source. And number two, I would like to briefly talk about how we can strengthen the link between climate change adaptation policies and plastic-free policies. In fact, during the summertime, when we suffered from the heat wave, as you can see here, these were provided to the vulnerable groups. And that included, for instance, cool mats, cool towels, cool tops, and so on and so forth. And some local governments also gave away free bottled water to the public. And in fact, I read an article which mentioned one county providing about 600 bottled water to the public. I'm not criticizing that, but because we face a climate crisis, we should stop the use of plastic, because by increasing the use of plastic, we cannot go plastic free and we cannot achieve the net zero policy. So we have to take into account the circular economy. And I would like to give you two proposals. First, when it comes to those in need, then, for instance, we can apply recycling technology to essential goods for those populations and also foster related startups and social enterprises. For instance, there was a case, this county distributed green umbrella, which used recycled banner umbrellas. And I think that that was a good idea that we can actually scale up nationwide. And number two, rather than providing bottled water, I think it's much better to provide public water fountains where people can drink water. And the local government should also communicate that to the public. I wish I traveled to more European countries, but last year I had the opportunity to visit Vienna only, and I was able to see some mobile drinking fountains installed in places where people gather. And also the citizens and tourists alike use the fountain in the summer. And because water is always available, you could see people using multi-use cups to drink water. And I do believe that those policies will help us go plastic free. And because Korea is quite well, doing well in adaptation, I think that Korea should lead actions against plastic pollution. And Youth voices will be presented at the Korean Pavilion at COP29 to collectively address the climate crisis and plastic pollution. And as one global citizen, I believe that I will stay interested in these topics even after the enactment of the Plastic Treaty. And as the host of INC-5 and the host of World Environment Day 2025, I hope that Korea can become a proud country leading the global efforts to end plastic pollution. I apologize for rushing through my presentation. Thank you very much for your time. Yes. I would like to apologize myself. I am sorry that I was not able to give you enough time to present, but thank you very much for keeping time. Yes, I think that you well represented the voice of the youth. Thank you very much for the innovative ideas. You talked about the plastic information website and also strong regulation. And you also talked about other ideas as well. Most of the time we talk about mitigation, but you talked about how we can link the policies to adaptation. And it's something that the older generation sometimes miss out on. So thank you very much for that feedback. But you talked about the statistics of the bottled water and the age groups. But then we have this like reverse correlation, so this negative correlation. So like the older people, they tend to drink from bottled water less, unlike the young people. So I think that we need to engage in more dialogue. Thank you very much for that.
이제 두 분의
Looks like... Sorry, we're not finished. We are supposed to go until 5:40, so we have about 15 minutes left. And during that 15 minutes, we do have people representing the government ministry. And I'm sorry I forgot your presence. I was about to say that we have concluded our panel discussion. But the two of you would have to split the remaining minutes. And so we would like to hear your opinions. And so first from the Ministry of Environment.
안녕하십니까?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Kim Tae-hun from the Resource Circulation Policy Division at the Ministry of Environment. So we are responsible for INC-5, and I think that plastic is the talk of the town this year. And because of that, I hope that we can draw meaningful conclusions to end plastic use. Now, if you look at the G20 environmental ministers meetings or other environment meetings, their leaders understood the importance of plastic, and they have been engaging in multiple meetings, and we are also doing our best to lead this initiative. Now, we heard from many speakers, and I think that it all brings down to one keyword. You talked a lot about circular economy, and it all boiled down to one keyword. So first, when it comes to circular economy, well, I actually have a material ready, so I would like to briefly talk about this. Chairperson Han, when you served as the Minister of Environment, you emphasized the importance of transition of the society and also about the just transition in terms of the climate and so on and so forth. Now, the previous circular economy of the resources, I think it now has to include the production and manufacturing as well, not just the consumption side. And we established a legal framework for that. Now, it emphasizes circularity and also promoting the circular usage of the products and also the economies of scale. And it talks about the certification system for circular resources to reduce waste. And to nurture new industries, we also have a regulatory sandbox for a circular economy, and that can actually lead to innovative policies, and that's what the ministry is encouraging. And for transparent PET, we collect that separately to recycle that, and now the ratio will be brought up to 30% mandatorily by 2030, and that is for the PET products. And we also want to employ cutting-edge technologies like AI to take the circular system to the next level. And also, as the previous speakers mentioned, Korea, when it comes to EPR, we have been running this for over 2 decades, so we have extensive experience on this. It has been doing well. So on the occasion of INC-5, we plan to hold concurrent events. And let's say if, for instance, developing countries adopt EPR, we will have some consulting booth to give them support, so that the developing countries can develop their own capacity and join the global movement in cutting plastic waste. Now, at the ministry, we, of course, urge the treaty at the global level, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the framework is well established here in Korea. So I look forward to your support and encouragement. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You talked about what the Ministry of Environment is doing with respect to plastic waste reduction. Thank you very much.
마지막으로
Now, last but not least, from MOTI. Hello, I'm the leader of the chemical industry team at MOTI. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll be very brief. So my team is working on plastic reduction and its pollution. One, we deal with recycling. So today, this year, we have actually created a pyrolysis facility that is at a massive scale. And I would say, globally speaking, they only have three facility of its size, one in EU, one in Japan, and one in Korea. And also in Ulsan, we have created an ARC as well. So Korean companies are doing very well in terms of addressing their recycling issue. And our ministry is trying to support them through tax deduction, for example, and creating relevant policies. And we're working together with the MOE to look at the track records of greenhouse gas reductions and to have that be recognized. And also the second thing that we're doing, aside from recycling, is biodegradable plastic. So with regards to biodegradable plastic, we have about 50,000 tons that are being produced domestics, and also about 80 to 90,000 biodegradable plastic that is being produced in elsewhere in Southeast Asia. We're doing a lot of R&D efforts, but these are very expensive, and therefore companies are struggling with it. But I hope that so we're trying to look into how the government can actually support the companies who are working towards a biodegradable plastic so as to reduce plastic waste going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you. Looks like the panel discussion is completed. We have covered much of what is in the booklet, so now it's time for us to engage in a free discussion. I would like to ask a question. So MOFA, MOTI, and MOE are represented here today. Who is taking the lead in addressing this issue, or what is your respective roles? Can you elaborate? So at MOFA, we are responsible for the attendance of the meetings and everything else that is involving the International Plastic Convention. So there are some aspects of the convention where there will be some common obligations that we would have to follow, and there are aspects of supporting the implementation of individual countries in implementing that. And of course, transparency is involved to some extent. Now, as for the mandatory regulation, we're working together with MOE and MOTI. As for the implementation methodologies, like for example, how are we going to support developing countries? That's a sole responsibility of MOTI. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Before we take questions from the floor, I think we received a question from overseas. I think it was from the YouTube channel because we are live streaming this not just in Korean but also English globally, as a matter of fact. So I think this question is directed to Dr. Jorg. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce your last name. Dr. Jorg Beverendorfer? So this is a question to you, I think. So the question is in English. So my pronunciation is very bad. Nevertheless, I'll just read it in English.
Live YouTube English channel. Kara is asking to Beverendorfer, PPWR dash proposal is EU dash regulation no directive, or has it now changed PPWR as in packaging and packaging waste directive? 그거고 여기 지금 우리 사무처장께서 추가 설명이라 그래가지고.
So here now, okay, I will repeat the question in Korean. Now you have the policies in EU, so now you have directives as well as regulations in the EU depending on the scope. So anyways, I think that there was a question about PPWR. So if you understood the question.
So please answer to it.
Not 100%, but I just want to make sure that it is understood what's the difference between a EU directive and a EU regulation. Whereas it is correct that the EU regulation has direct effects, and the directive has not direct effect because it has to transpose into national law. This does not mean that the directive has less value or is less important. It follows the subsidiarity principle of the EU that as far as it is possible, it should be regulated topics at the member states level. And if this is possible, there is also some need additionally that there might be some flexibility necessary between member states. Regulation is then not taken but a directive, but it doesn't mean in any way that it means less value or a different measure of taken step from the EU side. This is very important to know. So there should be no balancing between regulations and directives as regards the content.
네, 알겠습니다.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Okay. Because we did not receive any further questions on YouTube, I will now open up the floor for more questions.
Excuse me, I think the question also related to Jorg was about the packaging and packaging waste directive and the status of it. Yeah, it was a little bit unclearly stated, but yeah.
The question is about whether the PPWD is a directive or a regulation. This person has understood it as a regulation, but is it a directive or a regulation?
No, just to make it, it's a directive, but it has been proposed by the Commission. And as I said, we need then a position of the Council, a position of the European Parliament, and then it comes to a trilogue between the three institutions. And if there's a political compromise, then it leads to a law which will be then published. And in this case, afterwards, there would be a transposition time for member states, which is normally around 2 years, but depends on each directive. But we are not so far. We are at the proposal stage of the Commission.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I think that's enough for question. 자, 그러면
Now let's open up the floor for further questions.
질문이나 아니면 무슨 코멘트나
Any questions or comments are welcome as well. Any questions or comments about the Plastic Convention and INC-5, anything related to the topic that we're talking about today? We'll hand you the microphone. Can you please state your name and affiliation? Because we'd like to know who you are. And make your question short. Hello? I'm very interested in ending of plastic pollution, and I'm from a company that does related R&D. It's called KSD Plant. I'm the CEO. My name is Kim Seong-tae, and we are headquartered in Busan. So I'd like to state one thing. So Ms. Isora said that there are lots of problems that come with recycling plastic, that there's greater cost and greater greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore recycling poses some issues. And also, Mr. Hong Soo-yeol talked about how food waste and wastewater sludge, when they are recycled, microplastic can actually be expanded and it could come into our bodies easily. So there's one comment that I would like to mention with regards to those two comments. So to end plastic pollution, we need to return plastic back to the nature in a clean state. So we are actually focusing more on pyrolysis right now, but according to the technology that we're developing, it's not been distributed yet, but we're going to commercialize it next year and have it launched into the market. But we can not only work on plastic with our technology, but all organic materials and all waste that come from households to create clean hydrogen and create material for the secondary battery cell. And so everything that you're concerned about can be resolved through the technology that we have ready for next year. And also with regards to the carbon dioxide emissions, there's zero emissions for that technology, and it has high economic feasibility as well. So we're going to do a pilot project later, and we hope that you'll be able to take part in the pilot project to see the outcome of our technology. And please take our technology into reference when you are engaging in discussions about this very issue. Yes, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm from the private sector. I'm from Chemical, Advanced Material. It's a pleasure to meet you. So I have a few questions. Now, when it comes to biodegradable, and Mr. Hong, I think that you gave us some data. Anyways, you talked about the certification for biodegradable materials, and then for eco-friendly, well, they are viewed as one, which causes difficulty. But then now, of course, now if you look at UAE or the US, they have, for instance, their own certificate regulation. But then in Korea, we do not have a specific criteria for that. So be it, for instance, waste industry, in the industry, or at home, we do not differentiate the two as well. And then now, PLA, if you look at that as well, now, for instance, let's say that you have the industrial compost and the home compost, and then after 120 months or so, there's no microplastic found. So papers actually show that. But now I think that if you look at the UK data, in 4 to 7 years, it becomes biodegradable. But then in Korea, well, of course, now you have the industrial compost and housing compost. We do not even have the classification of housing. And that means that plastic, we say that they last for 700 years or 1,000 years even, which causes a lot of pollution. But then if it becomes biodegradable within the next few years, then it will be something that will receive global attention in terms of the technology. And I think that we need more communication channels or platforms to discuss those technologies. And also, I'm sure that you know of PP. So we use the PP foam. And what we do not have PP foaming technology. But then once you do that foaming, then that means that 36% of, for instance, virgin materials will be used less. And we do have many certifications that we received from the government, and we have many track record. But then I don't think that we have many platforms where we can talk about our technology, which is quite frustrating. And then recently, we received an order from the States, and then I talked about how the foaming technology can reduce virgin materials use. And of course, now with the transition into biodegradable materials in other countries such as the US, anyways, now it will go to nature, it will disappear. And then now in Korea, we focus more on the circular economy of the resources. But anyways, I think that we need to promote technologies like this further on the global stage, which will be quite encouraging. So thank you very much for hearing me out. Thank you.
혹시 다른
Any other questions?
있으신지요? 저희가 지금 시간이 이제 한 15분.
We have around 15 minutes left. I think we can accommodate 1 or 2 more questions. Hello. I'm from Green Union. I'm a journalist. My name is Kim Ji-young. So we've been doing some internet series article on plastic pollution. And basically here in Korea, when we're trying to reduce plastic, we are looking, I don't think we're really looking into alternatives like papers or aluminums when we say we want to reduce plastic. So we did have a good system for paper alternatives, but then there are some articles that are saying that the paper alternative system is actually breaking down here in Korea. So I want to ask your opinion on that. And now we have people from the EU here. And as for the EU, I have 2 questions. One is, so I know that the EU is calling for plastic production reduction for the convention. So how are you trying to persuade the related stakeholders? And also here in Korea, when we talk about recycling, we talk about pyrolysis and chemical recycling. That's all part of the definition of recycling. But what's your stance on recycling? What's your definition of recycling? Wow, you have a lot of questions. Okay, first of all, I think MOE and MOT can answer the first question, and also someone from the EU can answer the second questions. So first of all, as for the substitutes and alternatives for plastics, yes, that is being discussed at the convention, and according to the result of the convention, we would have to make, and we are preparing for to make necessary responses once the substitutes and alternatives are incorporated into the convention. I don't know if that's enough to address your question. But anything else from Moti? No? Then why don't we move on to the EU side?
네, 말씀해 주시죠. 네.
Yeah, thank
You have the floor.
Very good questions. But I have to say that as regards to plastic reduction, of course, I mean, I think there are two really important issues. The one is what was mentioned by Kim Manuel beforehand, I think, is public awareness, particularly with young people. That's really key. And I'm personally also a bit surprised here, living here now for 2 years, that young people take quite unconsciousness from all the coffee shops their plastic cup and drink their smoothie. So this has to change, you know, and I think it's the task of the public authorities to raise this awareness, and I'm grateful that you mentioned as well that maybe television is not really up to date, and I would not say that necessarily the EU is there more advanced. The second issue, which I think is important, and this might also not be perfect here in Korea, is that the companies have to be behind this. You need companies who really believe in this and want to have this change. If you don't have a company alliance who puts money into this, then it's very difficult to achieve this. So I think there should be some alliance between public authorities and companies to take this task. Otherwise, I think it's a very difficult path ahead. Your other question I don't like so much, is recycling. I have to say, in general, I would doubt, I don't know the regulations in detail or the directives that are set in this case, but in general, it will be very difficult to define in very nitty-gritty details what recycling is, because there will be different practices of member states in this regard, and to harmonize this would cost a lot of efforts and agreements from all sides. I can check on this, but I'm not sure how far we are in this regard as regards harmonization within the member states. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I actually have to open up the floor for questions from people who are not the designated panelists. So if the panelists could wait, because we would like to give other people some opportunities. Please go ahead.
Now, about plastic and also alternatives to plastic, that was your question. But then now, depending on the discussions of the INC-5, the government will take action. So that was the government stance. So I think that regardless of the outcome, the government should come up with a plan. So that is at least my opinion. So far, when it comes to going plastic-free, Korean government, the Korean government has focused too much on recycling itself. So now, when we have an alternative to plastic, there may be some problems arising from them, and the government should also get ready for that. Okay, so Modi, would you like to say something?
그 부분에
Well, regarding what you said, so it's not something that the government ministry can actually answer. I think the industry or the science industry would have to answer what we will do after we completely end the production of plastic. But we actually engaged in a lot of conversation with the stakeholders. But it's basically all comes down to the reduction of PPP. That's the gist of, or the controversial issue right now, right? And I talked with the industry. I talked with the Home Appliances Association, the Automobile Association, and Construction Association, and tried to see the opinions of the industries that are using PPP as for the end product, and they say that realistically speaking, there are no means to completely substitute PPP. So of course the government would have to come up with responses going forward, but realistically speaking, at the moment, we don't have a full substitute that is economically more feasible or more energy efficient. So that's the opinion of the industry. Thank you.
네.
Yes. I'll give you the floor. Yes. Hello. So I'm from a civic group. Seoul Environmental Group. And I have a question to the government. Now, this seminar was held on the occasion of INC-5 in Busan. And regarding that, what you said was not really pertinent to the stance that the Korean government will take about INC-5. You did not specifically mention what the Korean government will do. Of course, because this is a sensitive diplomatic affairs, maybe it's very difficult to disclose the stance, but because we saw some previous statements or declarations, and then now we are in November 1st. So are there any agreements at the Korean government level? That would be my first question. Now, Mofa?
Thank you for the question. So basically, I think I can just share the basic stance of the Korean government when it comes to plastic production, consumption, and waste management. The entire life cycle should be included in the convention. That is the stance of the Korean government. However, because there are differences in the opinions of concerning parties, but the scope of regulation and including production, for example, it really depends on how the language is going to be expressed. And so we would have to make responses to that when at the convention. And also, we need scientific proof. We have basic principles, like everything has to be science-based, for example. So we have a basic principle when we are stating our opinions. And as you said, the basic strategy that we have for the convention is something that we cannot share in detail at the moment. But we believe that other countries are going to be flexible in completing the draft for the convention, and we will also play out our flexibility in making significant contribution. Thank you. Yeah, we're nearing the end. So maybe just one more question. I think it was a follow-up question. Yes, so I have a follow-up question. Apologies for taking up more time. So then, you said that Korea is of the stance that we need to include the life cycle management within the International Plastic Convention. And one question that pops into my mind is that then we don't have much time left until the INC-5 and the convention. Did you really create a platform where we can create a consensus among the stakeholders for an entire agreement for the life cycle management? I don't think so. I don't think you've ever had any platform for discussion with the civil society concerning the life cycle management of plastic. The civil society has voice to say. However, we have not seen the government involving civic society into a platform for discussion. So it's usually just about pyrolysis and everything, but of course those are very important, but your discussions were mainly on these chemical and mechanical recycling of plastics instead of involving some topics that could involve the civil society. So have you really prepared a platform for discussion for all the stakeholders to take part in here in Korea? I think you need to ask yourself that question. So we don't have much time, so rather than giving you a solid answer on the question, I think we can definitely take that to heart and make a reference of the statement that she just said when you are engaging in INC-5, and I think we can perhaps conclude with that.
Now, we're drawing the end, so Chairperson Han, can you please wrap up with your closing speech? Yes, we started this seminar at 3. It's now 6. Thank you very much for engaging in a heated debate, and thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. And thank you very much, audience, for staying with us until the very end and asking questions. Now, when it comes to the plastic convention, yes, it will take place. And whether Korea wants it or does not want it, the entire life cycle will be included. So UNEP and the UN have been leading these discussions. And now if you look at the tools or the conventions that they have led, of course, in the beginning, they may not be perfect, but then over time, regulations or specific goals and so forth will be incorporated over time. So I do not know the exact outcome of INC-5, but I'm sure that all the countries will agree to include end-to-end of the plastic. Then what are we going to do by 2030? What about by 2040, by 2050? I think that we will begin to set the milestones throughout the entire journey. So, of course, for now, we do not have 100% alternatives, but we keep talking about this single-use plastic that are not necessities. So in our everyday life, you can avoid using single-use plastics. So we have to actually focus on the plastic which can be reduced, which will eventually lead to the reduction of polymer. And I'm sure that everybody will use their common sense to draw the conclusion. So I'm not saying that we need to cut plastic when we do not have alternative options. So in that sense, well, we want to make sure that the members of the industry are not overly concerned, but at the same time, we want to reduce plastic and eventually reduce polymer. And I would like to ask everyone to stay open-minded. So we are not engaging in INC-5, and we're not here at this seminar for our own interest only. I mean, the planet is suffering, and now what's left here on this planet? I think we have to pass the resources to the next generation. And then if you look at the situation right now, it is a catastrophic situation. So the babies who are born right now, the age groups in their 20s and the teens, I think we need to be more responsible to be able to pass on a better planet to the next generation. And the National Assembly will also provide full support to the success of INC-5. So over 20 people will travel to Busan for the meeting. So I would like to ask your support. And let us finish this seminar with a big hand. Thank you very much for your participation and input. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think time has come for us to wrap up the seminar. Korea is hosting a lot of international events, especially these days. And when it comes to climate change and plastic issue, I think they are of an utmost importance. As a matter of fact, it's more important than any other international issues that are being discussed today. And so not only governments, but individuals, companies, everybody has to take interest in this matter. And as a matter of fact, I think I myself should set an example in trying to reduce plastic use in my daily life. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us until the very end. Thank you to the speakers and the panelists and the attendees. And that concludes the seminar. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, everyone. If you have 1 minute to fill in the event survey distributed to you,